Hey there. So, there's something happening here, and what it is ain't exactly clear. Before I get into the past week's events, I'd like to make it clear that I am not an Iran expert, and I've only been focusing on the country again for like the past 6 days or so. So take what I say here with a massive grain of salt. But I think I might be able to shed some light on why U.S. media outlets are having so much trouble with this topic and took so long to finally start covering it. The thing is, what's happening now doesn't fit with the story that these media outlets want to tell about Iran. All media outlets in the United States, left and right, Trump-loving and Trump-hate-loving, are super invested in a particular narrative about Iran. Iran is super scary. The mad mullahs of Tehran are using their oil wealth to take over the region. Their agents are everywhere, and we must not try to appease them the way we appease Hitler. Seriously, people believe this stuff. Countries like the US and Israel have really big defense budgets, and they need credible threats to justify them. So we hear a lot about the evils of Iran. Don't get me wrong, there are parts of this story that are very, very true. The Iranian regime is terribly repressive, and they do a lot of bad things, both at home and abroad. Our sympathies should absolutely be with the Iranian protester on the street. But the Iranian regime is a lot weaker than the Persian Hitler story claims. And that's why U.S. coverage of the past week's issues in Iran is so confusing. To do a good job covering the Iran protests, you have to acknowledge a bunch of things that U.S. government and media usually tries to hide. Iran's current uprising is inseparable from the complexity of the Iranian system. The country's got some elements, like the president and parliament, that are more democratic than most Middle Eastern countries. But it's all wrapped in extra layers of approval and control that keep the religious elite in power. Like, imagine if the Electoral College in the United States didn't just have weird math, but also had unaccountable electors who decided who could run for office and tried to rule in accordance with the Bible. Actually, the original U.S. system was more like this, with senators that were appointed rather than elected, but that's a different video. The figure of the supreme leader is particularly offensive to those of us who like representative democracy. He can override essentially everything, and he serves for life. A lot of analysts in the United States don't bother thinking about this complexity. They claim that Khamenei is an evil dictator, and that's everything you need to know about the Iranian regime. And that's why people are having such trouble understanding what's been going on this week. The consensus seems to be that the protests were started by hardline supporters of the supreme leader in an effort to discredit the moderate president. These protests have now spun completely out of control and are now aimed at both men and the regime as a whole. Does that strike you as the sort of thing that happens in a country we should be scared of? These protests are happening in a completely different world from 2009. Those protests were larger, but on every other metric, these are scarier to the folks who rule Iran. 2009's protests were largely about rich people in Tehran, the capital. This time, they are everywhere, and the capital is an afterthought. Back then, the protesters had demands, elements of which have been incorporated in today's reformist agenda. Now there is just anger. It's economic, but it's also about almost 40 years of broken promises. Many in the United States are trying to portray the regime reaction as unified and repressive, despite the fact that the hardline supreme leader and the moderate president are reacting very differently. I suspect that these protests really could be a good thing for President Rouhani and lead to a more moderate Iran that's better to its people. This would make the whole Iran as Hitler story a lot harder to sell. It's too early to tell for sure. What this all means is a mystery to analysts who know a lot more about the country than I do. But what seems obvious to me at this point is that Iran's foreign policy just isn't sustainable. This level of discontent in Iran can be suppressed, and it almost certainly will be. But they can't arrest everybody. And bribing the rest of the population into submission will require a lot of that scarce oil money that will not now be headed to Lebanon or Syria. We can disagree about how much of a threat Iran's regional influence really was, but it's hard to shake the suspicion that the U.S. and Israeli defense industries will miss it when it's gone. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and thank you so much to the producers and patrons that make these videos possible. If you think you might be interested in joining these folks, why don't you click on the Patreon link here to find out more.